Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AF. Our Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. As I mentioned, I've got a column up at rightlyconcerned.com. I would encourage you to go there and read it, a column on Russell Moore. And I want to just close the loop on that conversation. The essence of my column is that I think maybe Russell Moore has been scared straight. I don't know Russell Moore. I've never met him. He's never responded to an invitation to come on this program where I could talk with him about his views. All I know is what he says, and what I read. A number of those things have been pretty alarming. As I mentioned at the end of the last segment, he said things like the culture war is over. There's nothing we can do about it. Same-sex marriage is inevitable. We've got to resign ourselves to that. We have to prepare for a future when we're in a distinct minority. There's no possibility we can ever have a majority of Americans that are morally minded any longer. That possibility is over forever. We've lost the millennials. The millennial generation is not with us. They don't like the tone of our message. We're losing them. We're driving them away. We've got to finesse the issue of marriage. We've got to soften our tone. We've got to lower the volume. We've got to change our rhetoric, or we're going to lose the entire millennial generation. And so that's what he's been saying. But apparently, I think he's getting a lot of backlash from those in the Southern Baptist Convention that want a stronger, firmer voice speaking for the convention. I think they look at Dr. Moore, and he seems like a very nice guy to me. Don't misunderstand me. He seems like a fine man. He seems like a really nice guy. He's obviously a really bright guy. He's very articulate. He is very well educated. He's obviously very polished. From everything I've read, he's an outstanding husband and a great father. So I want to be careful here. This is about his positions. This is not about criticism of him as a person. I'm sure in his personal walk with Christ, he is a model of what we want a Christian man to be, in the way he treats his wife and the way he treats his children and the way he conducts himself with personal integrity. So I want to be very clear about that. But it's his positions in public that I've had a problem with. And I think maybe others in the Southern Baptist Convention have had a similar problem, and I believe they've expressed their concerns to the leadership of the Southern Baptist Convention or the leadership of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Now, again, I don't know that that's happened. I'm not privy to any of that back channel communication, any of that information. I'm just simply making an educated guess. And part of that's based on the fact that I know so many Southern Baptist pastors that I admire and I respect, because they are unflinching in their loyalty and their allegiance to the whole counsel of God, and they're unintimidated. Nobody can intimidate the Southern Baptist pastors that I know into being silent or into sending out some kind of weaselly message about what the Word of God teaches on homosexuality and marriage. And so I got to believe, because I know the quality of pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention, there have to be a lot of them not happy with the way that Russell Moore is representing the convention, the denomination. And I think they have made their voices heard. You know, in the first column I wrote about Russell Moore, I said, look, this is an issue that the Southern Baptists have to work out for themselves. He works for them. He's under the umbrella of the convention. Nobody else. I mean, they have to decide whether they've got the right guy sending the right message in that position. Nobody else is in a position to make that call. But I just want to compare a couple of things that Russell Moore said before and what he said to the Huffington Post. It was published yesterday. My column, again, is up at rightlyconcerned.com. You could also go to the Huffington Post and read the extended interview. It prints out the 4 pages with him. I would encourage you to do that. Now, here's what he said back in March about a federal marriage amendment. This is what he said. This is a quote from Russell Moore in March about a federal marriage amendment. It is a politically ridiculous thing to talk about right now. That's Russell Moore in March. A federal marriage amendment is a politically ridiculous thing to talk about right now. Now, here's what he said to the Huffington Post yesterday. No, I don't say a constitutional amendment is foolishness. I just say I think a constitutional amendment is ideal. It would be ideal if we had a constitutional amendment, if we were able to get that passed tomorrow to be able to define marriage as the union of a man and a woman. I think it would be in the best interest of American society. So recognize the huge shift here in his language and his tone. He's gone from in March saying that a federal marriage amendment is a politically ridiculous thing even to talk about. Now he is saying it is ideal. Twice he says it's ideal. If we could get it passed tomorrow, this would be in the best interest of American society. Something has gotten a hold of Russell Moore between March and May. Then on religious liberty, this is what Byron York said about Russell Moore when he was at this convention that was hosted and organized by Russell Moore to speak to journalists. Here is Byron York. Moore's fallback position, there's no other way to describe it, is to insist that once the marriage fight is lost, the beliefs of Americans who oppose homosexual marriage on religious grounds be respected. In other words, Moore's position is the battle for marriage is lost. The best we can hope for is some crumbs of religious liberty. Now here is what Russell Moore said yesterday. See, I do not agree with that. In other words, I don't agree with myself. I don't think we can say, let's just stop the conversation about what marriage ought to be and focus simply on the question of religious liberty. We can't simply say, well, let's just assume that we are bigots and whatever, and let's protect our religious liberty. I think we have to work to protect religious liberty while at the same time we are articulating why this is a reasonable view to have. So back in March, all is lost. All we can hope for is a few crumbs of religious liberty. To the Huffington Post, no, I do not agree with that. We've got to fight for marriage at the same time we fight for religious liberty. Then when he talked about the millennial generation, here's what he is recorded as saying, I think this is Wall Street Journal, we must tone down the rhetoric and pull back from the political fray because of the visceral recoil to conservative positions among millennial evangelicals. So he says, look, we've lost the millennial generation. We've lost them on the issue of marriage. We're turning them off because our language is so strong. We're so forceful. We're so direct. They don't like that. They want nuance. They want finesse. They want softer. They want kinder. We're not giving it to them, and so we're losing them. And that was his message back in March. This is what he said to the Huffington Post yesterday. Some younger evangelicals say, let's cut a deal with the other side of the culture war, and they'll just say you can have same-sex marriage in the civil arena and just protect our religious liberty. I think that's an incredibly naive way to approach this. So what he was saying in March, battle is over, we've lost it, best we can hope for is a little bit of religious liberty. Now he's saying to the Huffington Post, that is an incredibly naive way to approach the issue. We must hold to a Christian sexual ethic. There are some in the secular media, again, who don't know many evangelicals who assume all of our young people are embracing same-sex marriage. That's really not even the case. It's not even true. Once one looks at actual conservative evangelicals who actually go to church, if anything, I find that they're even more committed to a robustly Christian sexual ethic. So in March, he was saying, we've lost the evangelicals. They're gone. Our tone has been too strident. We've been too strong. We've been too forceful. We're driving them away, driving them out of the church. We'll never get them back. Now he's saying, hey, people that think that completely fail to understand the number of young evangelicals, young millennials who are going to our churches who believe just as passionately as you and I do about the sanctity of marriage. So all I'm saying is something or someone has gotten to Russell Moore between March and May. I just want to compare the two headlines on stories about Russell Moore. This was a headline that appeared last fall in the Wall Street Journal. And this is when we began to develop real concerns about Russell Moore. And we tried to contact him. Our president, Tim Wildman, repeatedly tried to contact Russell Moore just to have a conversation. He just wanted to talk to Dr. Moore. We're getting some confusing signals here. I'd like to chat. I want to see where you're coming from. We've enjoyed our working relationship in the past with Richard Land and the Southern Baptist Convention. We want to continue that. We love the Southern Baptist Convention. We admire that convention. We've worked happily with them in the past. We want to continue working with them. You are partners with us in the kingdom. I'd like to talk because we're concerned about some of the signals. Did not even get a return phone call. Now, here is what the Wall Street Journal's headline was last fall. Evangelical leader preaches pullback from politics and culture wars. That was the headline about Russell Moore. He is a preacher, an evangelical leader, who is preaching a pullback from politics and a pullback from the culture wars. Now, here is the headline in the Huffington Post from yesterday: evangelical leader not waving white flag on gay marriage. So the headline in these major publications went from pulling back from the culture war, now all of a sudden, to not waving the white flag. No surrender here. Here is an evangelical leader that's going to continue to fight for the sanctity of marriage. Now, the Huffington Post interviewer by the name of John Ward, the guy that wrote the piece, he even says at one point in the interview, as Russell Moore, I believe, is backpedaling. I believe he's backpedaling furiously from the things that he said in March. And John Ward called him out on it. He said, it does sound like you are backpedaling, to be frank with you. So the Huffington Post interviewer says, wait, this is different than what you were saying in March. Well, I don't doubt that he's backpedaling. I think he's backpedaling furiously. And I'm guessing that Russell Moore has felt enough heat to see the light, and we can certainly hope so. But here's what I got to say. Here's how I want to finish this segment. I like the new and improved Russell Moore. I like the new and improved Russell Moore much better than the old one. If this represents a true change of heart on his part, this is something to celebrate. This means we've got a culture warrior back leading the troops into battle, and that is good news. Let us hope and pray that it is so. Now, one of the ways he could demonstrate that this is a genuine change of heart and position on his part, and not just tactical to, save his job or whatever, would be if Russell Moore would be willing to accept an invitation from Richard Bott, willing to accept an invitation from Janet Mefford, willing to accept an invitation from me to come on one of our radio programs and talk about the way forward that he sees for himself, for his office, and for the Southern Baptist Convention. The invitation is open. We'll be happy to have Dr. Moore on this program anytime he would see fit. I know Dick Bott would be happy to see him on their program. Janet Mefford would be glad to have him on the program. To this point, Russell Moore has only interviewed with safe venues. Eric Erickson has a radio program, talk show host, but very friendly. He loves Russell Moore. Wasn't going to get any challenging questions on that program. So we'd love to have him here, have a heart-to-heart. Focal Point AFR Talk. We'll be back in 2.